Good evening and welcome to tonight's studio. To the studio tonight even. And I need to turn that volume down, otherwise I will totally confuse myself and you'll hear feedback and all sorts of things. Okay, right, so we finished the pyrography of Theo yesterday. And I don't want to watch myself on this particular thing. So we'll watch that other screen. Yeah, sorry, my brain's just went and did a flip. Oh yeah, we finished the pyrography of Theo last night. Excuse me, I've just had fish and chips and I keep wanting to clear my throat. Put my coffee down there. And one of the things I'd like to do is do some airbrushing. It's about 2 years since I last had air in a brush, in an airbrush, and it'd be quite nice to do some more, but it takes a bit of setting up. I've got to move this computer that's in front of me. I'd have to work out what to do with the camera that's on the top of there, and this camera and the microphone and the air supply, whether I use my big compressor or the little one that's on the side there, and if I put the little one on the desk, it'll probably get microphone will probably pick up the vibration if I put it on the floor. I've got to find power for it, and just basically even to set up the easel and put a paper on it. I just didn't have time tonight. So that may well be something that ends up having to wait until the weekend to do. So I don't really want to start anything else like a pyrography or a carving. So I've got this to finish. It's Micromaille here. And a couple of other things I want to do with this, with Micromaille. And I've got some magic dots to finish, so I've got plenty of things, as I mentioned before, to do, including a rug. So until we get to a time when I've got time to get the airbrush stuff out and set up, we're going to carry on with some of the other things. But sorry, I'm just trying something. I was just wondering. I've got some memory wire, and I was just thinking then about pushing a piece of memory wire down there to see whether it would actually go down, because then it will actually wrap and it will act like a it won't need a clasp. Maybe put a charm or something on the ends, but to do that it needs to be longer. Excuse me, and it's already quite expensive as it is without it being any longer. So we'll see. Maybe just put I might just get it to 8 inches or 7.5 inches. And then put a clasp on it, and we'll leave it at that. But at the moment this is what, something like 6 inches? Yeah, 6 inches. So we need to go to at least 7 in order to get it long enough for, generally women's wrists are 7.5 inch average-ish, somewhere around there. So need another inch. Clasp generally adds 1/2 inch, so that would be why I want to go to 7.5 inches. So I need to open some more of these things. The only problem with I love working with Micromaille, but it's tiny, and when I mean tiny, I mean tiny. Not even sure you can see that on the end of there. So tiny, I've actually got a problem even picking it up. This is what I could do with 2 cameras and a close-up camera. Let's see if I can bring this in a bit closer. Being careful not to dunk it in my coffee. It should be autofocus, so little tiny ring. It's 3.2 millimeters diameter is that ring, so it really is small with a capital S. So I need to open a number of these rings, so I shall do that whilst I am talking. So yes, I was thinking of doing some airbrushing. Whilst I've been busy with other things over the past couple of weeks and being unable to stream, I've been thinking about the sort of things I might want to do in airbrushing. It's been a while since I've done any. As I mentioned at the start of this stream, it's got to be something like 2 years since I actually used an airbrush. It's almost 2 years since I actually picked up an airbrush, but that's not strictly true. But I do feel like having another go at it. Now I was thinking about having a go at trying to pick one of these rings up. I like working in black and white or monochrome. So what I was thinking about doing is maybe doing a monochrome airbrush. So that will be on black paper and using white as the only colour. Now white's a real pain in the neck to use, and hopefully the pigments I've got, the paints I've got haven't deteriorated over 2 years of not actually using them, and they won't have lost too much of their solvent, and it becomes usable. Well, it still is usable, but we shall have to wait and see for that. So I was trying to think of the sort of subjects I might want to do. Now a lot of things, you know, if you think about scenic type images, then a black background, white image sort of, you know, stands out as being a... Oh, I just thought of something else. Stands out as being a nighttime. It's always a good thing. I would, you know, representing something in the dark. One of the last ones I did, for example, was of John Miles, and I did it of him on stage. So he was, you know, it's a darkish sort of environment, and the image was rendered in just white. So I was trying to think of some other things to do, and the one that just occurred to me was the one that we've done in scratchboard, our scraper board, which was earthrise. But I'm not quite sure whether I'd want to do that one in colour this time. So I was also thinking of some other things, and for some reason transport actually came to mind. So a couple of three things were running around in my mind. One of them was doing something like a train, something like one of the high-speed trains on track in moonlight, sort of lit, if you like, lights in the windows. So, you know, we've got some sort of image there, but it's dark enough that you're sort of just seeing it in black and white. The other one was an airport. Doing an airport in sort of the same sort of style. You know, it's night, if you like, perhaps it's raining, and we've got an aeroplane on the apron, terminal building behind it, and go from there. And for some reason, the other thing that has been sort of fascinating me a little bit just recently has been a canal boat. So that was another possibility, although canal boats, these days at least, do sort of don't travel at night. They tend to be prohibited from travelling at night, so we could take artistic license, of course, for that. But I might want to do that one as a colour image at some point. So we'll think about that and we'll see. But that's the sort of thing I was thinking of doing when we get the airbrush out. So I don't really know which of those. I mean, the reason why I was thinking of the train was actually the reverse of that. I saw an image just recently of a train where you sort of were looking down the length of the train, and it was foggy or misty, and so the back end just disappeared into mist, which is kind of the reverse if you think. In fact, I think what was the livery? Is it GWR, the Great Western Railway, which I think at the moment is black. And so it was, it's kind of the reverse, if you like, white with black as the image source or the image colour, disappearing into sort of white background, mist and things like that, and of course black is just the inverse of that. So that was one thought that crossed my mind, to do that. And I don't quite know what struck me as a reason to do the airport. I have seen not an airport, but I have seen images before that have been painted onto velvet, black velvet, which is kind of black background and with like an oil paint on, and I was thinking that's the sort of image that would look good. Also, an airport would look good on that because they tend to be quite vibrant, fairly vibrant colours on velvet. In actual fact, it almost strikes me as being a good one to do in pastel, because despite its name, pastel can be really vibrant colours. And keep thinking about having a go at pastel. I may just have a play with it electronically first, but Lady. Oh, who is it now? I have forgotten. But there is an artist that I've watched on here on Twitch. I can almost see her name, and I can't recall now. But who has been doing pastel work, and it's quite inspiring to watch. I love the vibrancy of the colours that she was using for things like sunsets and things like that. So that sort of inspired me to have a go at that at some point as well, but not just yet. The only thing about these little tiny rings is they are really hard to pick up. And of course, you'd go through a lot of them and don't get very far, relatively speaking. I mean, in terms of the fact that, how far you get, a ring is a ring, and it's if you go through sort of 200 rings, it doesn't matter whether they are 3.2 millimeters or 10 millimeters across, you still get through the same quantity. It's just a 3.2 millimeter ring is, of course, a third the size of a 10 millimeter one. So you need about 5 of them to cover the same length. See, they're just going all over the place. Which is the unfortunate thing about doing Micromaille. is the fact it's Micromaille. You know, the difficulty is in the title. Oh yes, thank you very much. I do love it though, because I just love the tiny work. You know, it's something which is quite hard. It has almost a delicate look to it, which is something that you don't actually get with the bigger rings. And I'll just get rid of this so it doesn't turn off on me. But I've got here, for example, this is stainless steel, but you know, it looks a lot more chunky than this. Actually, I mean, the daft thing about it is this is about half the size of that, and yet they are something like, actually no, I suppose they're I think they're about, what are they, 6mm rings, 7mm rings I think. These are 3.2, so I suppose they are half the size. But it just looks a heck of a lot more delicate. I want to actually have a play at some point with making some sheets and seeing how we go from there with that. In fact, I almost want to try what it would be effectively a knitting pattern. In that creating what would be a what was it called? God, it's that many years since I've done any knitting. But basically the wool, you know, a cable, that's what I'm looking for. You get the wool that crosses over and then crosses back and so on. I'm kind of wondering whether you could do that with chainmail. Or micromaille. I'm not sure I'd want to do it with chainmail itself. Micromaille maybe. And I kind of half expect making sheets with micromaille to be a lot faster. And if it is, then I would have been better doing this with a sheet rather than doing it as a tube that I'm working on now, because this particular, it's another one that's escaped. I'm going to end up finding lots of little tiny metal rings all over the carpet here. Yeah, it's this particular weave can be done as a sheet and then wrapped to create the tube. So it's going to be interesting to see if a sheet can be created a lot faster. And I have suspect it will, because you can use speed weaving techniques on sheet. Actually, you can on this, but some tubular things you can as well. This is something called round maille. If I did a variation of this which resembles, he says, because I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but resembles Byzantine. It's Byzantine. What's it called? But you can actually use speed weaving techniques on that as well. So I don't know. I am opening rings. Speed weaving involves you opening some and closing some, so that you don't actually have to close them in the weave, which is, relatively speaking, quite time consuming. It's a lot quicker to close them one at a time, like in my hand here, than it would be to try and weave them and then close them. But for the majority of the rings in here, that's precisely what I have to do, is weave them and close them. It may just be possible, I guess, to speed weave, but I'm not quite sure how you do it. So I'm guessing tonight is going to be another quiet night on Twitch, on the stream. But if you're out there lurking and watching, please feel free to say hello. Check out some of my other sites. They're all down there on the right hand side. The Zaragonaut, which is my website, has got a little bit more information about me for a start. Not a lot. I'm quite a private artist. But there's a little bit more information about me and about some of the art forms. It's a website which is under development, shall we say, and I add to it as time allows, and so worth checking out from time to time. It describes some of the pieces that we've done on stream, and it will eventually describe some of the pieces that I've done off stream as well, but I figured I'd do the stuff that's been done on stream first, and so you can find out about some more about some of the pieces. For the pyrography, for example, there is Salute to Sunset there, and there's a description of why it's called that. So it might be a useful thing if you're interested. Oops, come back here, you. There's the usual Twitter and Facebook, of course. I tweet about the stream or about art, and they are generally speaking, shall we say, considered tweets. I don't go around doing things like saying, "Hey, I'm having a cup of coffee," or "I've just eaten my breakfast. This is what I had." You're not interested in that. I'm not interested in that, generally speaking. So why would I want to tweet it? But anyway, so generally, the tweets are to do with the stream or to do with the with the art forms that I'm doing or thinking of doing or trying or stuff like that. Occasionally, I also will ask you questions, and hopefully, you feel disposed to reply. Now, Facebook is there as well. Obviously, that's a little bit more in depth than Twitter these days. To be honest, it's starting to get very much the same, I think. And we've got Etsy there as well, because this sort of stuff is up for sale. If you want any of it, chainmail can look. Come back here, you. It can look really nice. Bracelets can look really nice in chainmail. They're available in all sorts of colours. These are silver. Well, this is natural aluminium, but there is anodized aluminium, which is shiny, like this one here, and it's also available in colours. And then there is stainless steel, which is like that. There is niobium, which kind of looks it's kind of like a dusty version of these. It isn't dusty, but it looks dusty. That sort of matte thing. And then we've got it's not niobium. It is titanium. Titanium looks dusty. This is niobium, which it looks quite. It's a shiny matte, or a matte shiny. But it's a lovely sort of colour. Is that? I'm going to do something with this at some point. Yeah, in fact, that's titanium. So as you can see, it's a really matte colour. Is titanium, and the niobium is shiny, or shinier. Not quite as shiny as the anodized aluminium, but it's obviously a different metal as well. Now, the titanium especially is quite good if you have some allergies, especially. The stainless steel isn't nickel free, by the way, so it can. If you do have an allergy to nickel, be careful of stainless steel. All stainless steel contains nickel. There are different degrees though, depending on which formula of stainless steel has been used. Can't actually remember what it is for these, but that's something you may wish to avoid. Aluminium, of course, doesn't contain any nickel, so that can be quite good, although some people do have allergies to aluminium, so that's where I guess things like titanium and the niobium come in. Both of those are a lot harder to work. They're both somewhat of a stronger metal than aluminium. I mean, having said which, of course, an individual ring is relatively weak, but once you weave them together, these things become quite strong. I'm not going to try and force that apart, but in sort of general wear, they don't come apart at all. And of course, Clavybug, hello! I haven't seen you for an awfully long time. How are you doing? I'm busy talking to myself, of course, and hadn't seen you pop up there. How are things going with you? Oops, a daisy! I cannot keep hold of these little tiny rings. They go flying all over the place. You're fine, thanks. That's good. Well, that's good. That's good. Have you been streaming much lately? I'm always talking. Of course, I'm always talking to myself. I only do it on streams, though. I'm better talking to myself when there's nobody listening. Come here. Okay, I can understand that. That's kind of what stopped me for a different reason, but stopped me streaming about a year and a half ago. Over a year, yeah. Well, it must have been well over a year ago I stopped for a bit. Kind of the same sort of reason. Not the same as you've got there, but sort of related to anxiety. Not so much about the streaming itself, but just in life in general. Because of course that was when I almost lost the job. You're going to do a vape building stream? Okay, this is where I am wondering if I understand the same thing by that as to what you've actually said. I have no interest whatsoever in smoking, but of course some people do, and they're using. My understanding of electronic cigarettes is it's called vaping these days because of the vaporizing of the liquid. So is this vape building stream a stream where you actually build one of these electric cigarettes? Which to me is just kind of a mouthpiece, a liquid bottle with the electric heating element somewhere in the middle. Which seems like it would be a really short stream. Okay, well, it sounds sort of interesting. It's from the point of view. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean it like it just sounded. For me, it would be something which I'd be interested to see once, and see how it's done, see what it's about. But I have no interest in the use of the end product. Okay. No, it would be the sort of thing I'd watch. Yeah, it's somebody creating something like that from bits, if you like, from the parts is the sort of thing that I would watch. So I'll have to keep an eye out for when you do it. Oh, okay. I've seen a couple of people do it. One of them is a creative streamer, glassblower, Glassman Cometh, I think. He's the one. But kind of, to be honest, it gets to annoy me when I watch him because he's always doing it and he's always referring to the fact that he's doing it. And it's kind of like, I can see that. I don't need you to tell me you're doing that. And but yeah, well, if you get a good response, great. I don't know if it's, well, I mean, it's summer at the moment, isn't it, on Twitch still? So we're not into the sort of winter just yet. So it's been really quiet at the moment as Twitch. Because I was kind of surprised. Don't know if you've noticed at the top of the stream window, I'm an associate, which kind of surprised me when I got offered it, because we just sort of come out of winter and it was sort of into summer, and it's for people like the small creative streamers like what I is, to nick a catchphrase. Summer's a terrible time for streaming. You just saw it. Thank you very much. I think the only thing I've got the thing I have a problem with to do with it is I get 3 sub emotes, one for each of the subscription levels, and for the life of me I cannot think of something that I could actually sort of use as a sub emote, because of if it's related to the stream itself. It's kind of like which bit of the stream, because I sort of do 6-7 different things on stream now, or otherwise you end up sort of copying or doing what everybody else does, which is sort of the rect or the lol or whatever, everybody else does the same things, and it's kind of trying to think of something unique is not easy. And then, having thought about it, of course I've got to then produce it in some way. You working on anything at the moment, Clarybook, other than, of course, your building vape machines? You're building another one, okay. You never know, if because I don't recall seeing anybody else on Twitch do that, so it would certainly, I guess, be a unique stream, and if they're the sort of things that are used by a lot of people, you never know, you might even turn it into a business. Hopefully, by the way, since you're familiar with my streams, the music and voice audio are not bad. I had to play around a little bit with the levels tonight, which I don't like doing just before a stream, but because the music was too loud here in the room, so I had to adjust all the levels, and I hope I haven't messed it up and I am sufficiently loud and the music is sufficiently quiet. Sorry, I'm just laughing there because I mentioned turning it into a business, and of course, Moobot, not just immediately just before I said it, it popped up the advert there. Right, I have one of the nice things about talking with somebody whilst you're doing this which is opening the rings, is you kind of just keep doing it and forget. And I've got a nice little pile there, so I'm actually going to do some. These things are 3.2 millimeters in diameter of these rings. And I almost need to wear a magnifying lens to see the things these days. They're also really fiddly in certain configurations like this. They're a little bit too big actually for this, just tiny. They're within acceptable range for this particular weave, but they're a little bit too big. And of course that's kind of like, instead of 3.2 millimeters, it should be 3.1. It's that sort of difference in little bit, but it's just enough to make the things a little bit more fiddly to use than they would otherwise be. Have I got that in the right place? Yes, I think so. I was just thinking then, I could have some fun here by continually asking you questions that you've got to keep putting down your build in order to answer on the keyboard. I have the advantage, of course, that I can talk and I don't have to put down what I'm doing. Although, as you may recall, 90% of the time when I start talking, I stop doing. Right. So this weekend, by the way, I don't know if you were when you joined the stream, but I think this weekend, probably not before, because of the time it takes to set it up. But I am actually thinking I will get the airbrush out and do some airbrush work. So you might have heard me just discussing with myself what image I might use, or what I might actually paint. So that might be something. I've not seen anybody do airbrushing on Twitch for quite a while now, since 3D guy. Is it 3D guy? 3D something. I've forgotten what his title is now. Was doing airbrushing on Twitch. 3D something. What was he? I can't remember. Oh, that's annoying. It's going to annoy me now. I'll actually have to look him up. But it's been about 2 years since I last did any airbrushing, so kind of would like to pick one up again and just practice the skills again. I like that. It's something I've only just noticed with this, and I don't know why it's doing it. But I've just noticed that this particular weave, actually you can see it on screen, has got a twist in it. I don't know why it's got a twist in it. It's not inherent in the design. It probably is just the way it sits. But yeah, because I've just untwisted it, it's sitting straight. But it's when it's got a twist in it, it's quite nice the way it's reflecting the light. Oh well, yeah, little things pleasing in my little mind, shall we say. It's a case of ooh, shiny. or as I was saying the other day, I don't get distracted very... Ooh, shiny. But, yeah. Okay. I'm kind of thinking... I actually like working with Micromaille, with this tiny stuff, but I've now this bracelet has now taken something like about 10 hours, and it's kind of like, you know what, I'd like to do something else. So I'm looking forward to finishing this. Nope, that didn't go where I wanted it to go. Come on. Dear, 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 dear. Patience is something that is required this evening. Where she's gone, I don't know. Oh, come on. I am starting to think that I am not in the frame of mind for Micromaille this evening. Oh, dear. Was that the right thing to do at that point? Yes, it was. Okay. Because this is so, well, partly because this is so tiny, it's actually quite difficult to see whether you're actually at the right state, you know, doing the right thing at the right point in time, or whether you sort of skipped one of the stages. It's a lot easier with the bigger rings to actually see them, of course. First flight relaunched. Okay. And then for anybody else watching, because I know Clarybug, you know all about this stuff. You've been here before. This is aluminium rings. This is actually, I was about to say natural aluminium. It's actually, you know, obviously polished aluminium, but it's not been anodized. So this is just a sort of, it's not had a coating of any kind applied to it. It's actually described as bright aluminium, because when it's polished it's bright, I guess, but it will over time tarnish slightly, which the anodized aluminium doesn't do. So this will go sort of slightly grey. Actually, to some extent, it's a relatively good companion to sterling silver. I was actually right. I thought I was wrong, but I'm actually right. To sterling silver, because sterling silver also oxidizes. So if I show these three side by side, the one on the right is anodized aluminium. It's quite shiny actually. It's duller than it normally is because it needs a good clean. The one in the middle is sterling silver, and the one on the left is this bright aluminium, which is not yet tarnished. But as you might be able to see, it's a closer match to the sterling silver. And as it tarnishes slightly, it will actually get a better match. So it's easily recognisable as not being sterling silver, but at least when they get closer to each other in colour, then it becomes a bit harder. Right, where did I get on here? So I've done that stage, so where's my next? Oh, okay, I'm doing that one. Right. Gotta go through there. So you can actually do chainmail with anything that's ring shaped, and that's a loose ring shaped, because you can have square shaped rings or triangular shaped rings or anything basically, I guess, with the hole in the middle. And you can, depending on what it is, depends on the weaves that you can do with it, but you can actually get some really interesting things done. If you're using rings that don't bend like this, then for example this particular weave you cannot do, but some of the weaves, for example, I use I'll say elastic rings. They're actually made out of neoprene, so you can have stretchy rings, for example, or you can use glass rings as well in weaves, and incorporate sort of glass rings. Other rings out of things like copper, niobium, titanium, stainless steel, all these sorts of things just give you different effects, different colours, different shadings, that sort of thing. And of course the different sizes allow you to do different things. For example, the larger rings are needed to do this sort of weave, which is a candy cane. This has a lot more flexibility. I can go from this really tiny ring I'm using here. I can't do candy cane with. It's there's not enough ring. Actually, there's not enough hole in the ring to do it. And boy, would that be fiddly if you tried. But my next one goes through there, or it will do if the rings cooperate. But as I talk to the rings, it'll generally do what they're told. And of course on this stream the old joke is there is no problem with talking to these rings. The problem comes when they talk back. Right. Yeah, so for some reason, in general art terms, canal boats have struck my fancy just recently. I've been sort of playing about with pencil and paper and drawing a few of them from sort of memory and imagination, and I've been sort of considering whether or not to do any with some of the art forms that I currently practice, like either the pyrography or the scraper board or something like that. Don't quite know why they've come to mind at all. I'm not sure whether they'd be better using colour images or colour paints, so maybe the airbrush, for example, rather than trying to do them in monochrome, because of course, well, for me, canal boats, it always tends to strike me as being country scenes, so lots of green, although of course canal boats traditionally are also associated with industrial areas, because of course that's what they were, the lorries of the time, carrying a lot of industrial materials and goods. Blimey, time flies. Time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. That's an old joke, is that one. I can remember that one from school, and that's a long time ago now. Right. Still haven't done anything yet this year about the glass blowing course. That's pending something else happening first, but that's still, well, at this point in time I guess it's looking less likely I'll be doing that this summer, and it may even be through into next year, but it's still in the books to have a go at doing that. You can see whether I actually like glass blowing. I was just thinking, there's a lot of art forms. Pyrography is one of them. Glass blowing is another, where the names aren't really necessarily as descriptive as they at first appear. Have I done that right, or have I done that wrong? No, I've done that right. I mean, glass blowing, for example, you can do a lot of glass work. Flame work actually is kind of feels more descriptive, but you know, you can do a lot of work where you don't actually blow any glass at all. You know, you can do all sorts of sculpture work with glass and never blow it at all. And pyrography is the same when people call it wood burning, because well, the you there is me, really. I never burn wood when I wood burn. I cook a lot of it, but I never actually set fire to it. Never burn it. So it's interesting how we pick names and things, or we use names for things. Some of these crafts like that, where they are sort of really a misnaming of what it is, and potentially gives a completely wrong impression as to exactly what you do or how you do it. Yeah, I'm usually really patient with doing this sort of stuff, but I'm kind of not really feeling it this evening. But I am persevering, partly because I know it will. Well, it'll do two things. It will calm me down while frustrating me, which is a really sort of diametrically opposite thing. I can get really frustrated and annoyed while doing something, but because I'm concentrating on it, I completely forget everything else, and I sort of calm down. Sometimes I get to the point of being what I would call philosophical, where I just get really relaxed, shall we say, and can just go on doing something, even as something that can be as irritating as this, without a care in the world. Don't often get like that these days, but it's kind of nice when it happens. It's not necessarily nice getting there, because usually it's as a result of something being really irritating to do, like pick these rings up. But I'll shoot them all over the room. And of course, by the time I've got this ring held, the other one that I was holding in my left hand here, the bracelet, and holding the rings in a particular position in order to get this ring woven through them, they've moved. If I wasn't doing this on stream, you know, at this point here, I'd go, you know what, that's it for tonight. But I'm going to carry on. I think a micromaille round maille weave, which is what I'm doing here, is going to be something I only do extremely rarely. I don't think I'll be doing another one of these for a long time, just because of the frustration level that you get with it. I love the look of the Micromaille, but I'm not that sure it's worth the time to and the frustration to do. So this may be a relatively unique piece. Right, so my next one is going there. So looking at it so far, in this length here, there's something like about 400 or more rings. Believe it or not, one of these days I will actually count them, but I'm not going to count them on stream. This stream has enough counting in it as it is already. And I think the people that watch by now know that I can count. So I don't want to start doing it again. Okay, yeah, so it goes through there next. Oh, that's why this is twisted. Because I'm going behind it anti-clockwise. Oh, well, that makes sense. I just realised that I'm actually putting the twist in this. Just the way I'm going around, you know, entering the rings. I go around and it's got the twist in it there. I think this will be potentially might be the last time I do Micromaille on stream as well, I think, because I am relatively certain, of course, it's not a fantastically good thing for you guys out there that may just be watching, or probably aren't actually, because it's so difficult to see what it is I am doing, because I'm working at with such tiny rings. And the fact that I can't zoom in, because if I do you won't see anything, because I can't hold it in a close enough position to zoom the camera in. I'll be forever out of frame. I'm guessing this is not a fantastically interesting thing to watch. Dear. Even if it wasn't as frustrating as it is by me doing things like dropping it and stuff like that. And of course there's no sharp chisels or anything like that involved for people to watch and sort of secretly hope I jab one in my hand or something, which I'm sure is what most a lot of people who watch the things like the carving are secretly hoping to see happen. The really daft thing about that is I'm more likely to injure myself doing chainmaille than I am doing the carving, because with things like the stainless steel or even the titanium, especially the titanium as well, I guess, is because it's such a hard sort of stiff metal. You actually have to put quite a bit of effort into holding and twisting the rings, and you know, I'm holding this like this, and if I got my finger over the gap between the jaws here, and I'm squeezing this ring quite hard. There is the risk that what happens is the ring shoots out of the end, and when that happens, one of the things you can hear is a loud crack, and the loud crack is because the jaws snap together. Because it's amazing, you can't actually make... I can squeeze these things as hard as I can and as quickly as I can. You might just hear that sort of dull thud. That's about as much as I can get. But if I'm holding on to a ring quite tightly and it slips out, it's like it's not like a rifle shot, but it is a really, relatively speaking, a loud crack. Because there's a lot of force in there, and if I catch the skin of my finger between these two jaws, as is quite easy to do in that situation, boy does that hurt. Guess how I know. As you've probably seen tonight, dropping rings is something which happens frequently. Chisel points, on the other hand, are kind of a more obvious danger, and therefore are less likely to have anything like that happen. So the real daft thing is people watch what they think is the dangerous stuff, and it's probably the least dangerous of the lot. Right, so where are we up to now? We've got that one to do around there. Okay. Yeah, I will be glad, I think, when this bracelet is done. It's that one next there, through that ring and that ring. So a really simple pattern to do is this one. It's one of the simplest ones. Especially for beginners. It's a variation on a weave that's called the box weave, which you normally do. I'm doing because this is called round maille, but it's the same as box weave, but it's done with 3 rings rather than 2 rings on each layer. But it's exactly the same weave. In fact, you can sort of just keep expanding on that. You can do it with 4 rings and 5 rings. It just gets a little bit more complicated the more you do. But to start with, you can start doing this with 2 rings per layer, and it gets called a box weave then. And Byzantine weave is a variation of that as well. And they're about the 2 simplest weaves that, other than a straight chain, I suppose, but something that looks like a chainmaille weave. And they're about the 2 simplest ones to do for beginners, because they are stable from the second layer that you put in, which means that you don't have to worry about holding rings in a really specific position, and there's no sort of really complicated pattern to learn and follow, and each alternate layer is exactly the same as the alternate layer before. It is a good one to learn with. Now I've just lost where I am, and this is just purely down to the fact that it's so tiny. So one of the things I've also got to do is I've got some nice niobium rings over to the one side of me here, which sort of there for me to try out. I've not used niobium before, so I'm kind of curious as to how it weaves. But I'm sort of trying to decide in my own mind what sort of thing I want to do with them. Whether I want to make a bracelet, or whether I want to, well, it may not be enough to make a necklace, but whether I want to make a partial necklace, or just what sort of weave I want to do on them as well. You see that clack? you might have heard that crack then. There was not a lot of force in that, but I can't make that sudden noise like that on purpose. It only happens when a ring slips off. And that's when, if you catch your fingers between the jaws when that happens, you still get that crack. Followed by usually a sort of a loud exclamation, which may or may not be suitable for broadcast. Mm-hmm. 25 to 9. Blimey, time does go fast sometimes. It is really surprising how long crafts of all kinds take. And I don't necessarily just mean chainmail here. I mean, which is generally speaking, I was about to say, is a relatively fast craft. It is when you're using rings that are larger than this. So the 1/4 inch rings, for example, you can complete a bracelet in about an hour. But if you think it's a bracelet taking an hour to make, still sounds like a rather long time. And I know it certainly surprises a lot of people who, for example, buy the chainmail from me, just how long it does take to make. A lot of people think you could do like one of these bracelets in about 10 minutes, and and to some extent I can kind of understand that. I mean, one of these this particular bracelet, I think off the top of my head, it's got about 56 rings in it, and that doesn't sound very many, but it still takes an hour to make. This, on the other hand, it takes about 10 hours to make, or more even. But the pyrography, of course, takes a lot of hours to do. The scraper board and all of these things. It's something that's kind of surprised me all the time. Even though I kind of know just these days that skilled crafts like these sorts of things are not fast, I'm still sort of really surprised by just how not fast they are, really. Right, I'm going to have a bit of coffee because my voice is starting to go. Right. That's what I thought. Okay, now then. We'll do a little bit more. I will be stopping at around 9 PM this evening. So, if you are watching, then that's just sort of some advance notice for you. See, I'm dedicated enough to carry on doing this whilst I'm streaming, but then I'm going to stop. It's not. It's not an art form or a craft that I'm feeling very much tonight. It's been an extremely busy day at work, and I think it sort of feels a bit like it's bleeding over into what I'm doing now. think working at this this scale probably needs a day when I'm not feeling particularly tired. One of the interesting one of the interesting things you have to learn when you're doing this sort of chainmail, shall we say, is just how much to open the rings. If you don't open them enough, then you can't pass a ring between the gaps unless you stop and open them a little bit more, and you'll have seen me opening a few because I haven't opened most of these enough. On the other hand, if you open them too much in some weaves, and this one is sort of half and half, it can be really difficult to get the ring through because it gets in its own way, and just the the one bit of the ring gets in the way of the other bit just because of the where they are positioned. So you end up in a situation where it's too small and it doesn't go in, too big and it doesn't go in, and you end up having to sort of find the middle ground. And of course, every time you've got to stop and position and reopen a ring like this, like I've just done there, it takes time, and that's time that you're not actually weaving, and it's sort of time that you're doing the same job twice. You've opened the ring once, and then you're having to open it again because you didn't do it right the first time. So interestingly, something as simple as the skill of opening a ring is actually relatively important to things like chainmail if you want to sort of progress, as in work fairly fast with it. If you just want to plod along and do half a dozen rings an hour, then of course it doesn't really matter much. But for example, if you're trying to sell some of these items that you make, then the speed at which you do it matters, because of course speed, or time to complete rather, is a large element of the cost, manpower, in crafts like this. The cost of the manpower is the large element of it. The materials, whilst they do cost, themselves are not the major element. And so, doing a job twice is something you always want to avoid in that situation. And so again, I've got to do that twice. I've got to open this ring a little bit more. Now it is something that with practice you get to do, and you get to do it first time every time. By which of course you can see I haven't practiced this for a while. I can't even get a probe through the right place at the moment. Oh dear. The other problem with working with Micromaille is the size of your pliers. These are the round-nosed chain-nosed pliers. They're pointed to come to a point rather than being flat across, so that you can actually get them into a chain and work chains, which is why they're called chain nose. But when you're working with rings this tiny, it causes you to lose them frequently, like I just have done there. The nose or the pliers itself potentially takes up quite a lot of the hole, even when you're holding it as close to the edge as you can, and that in itself makes it difficult to weave in some situations, because the pliers get in the way, and the fact that you've closed up half the hole that you're trying to get the ring into also contributes to that. So it gets, as you get smaller, it gets a lot harder to work. It's almost being masochistic in a way doing this. Oh, come on, Dodge. No, I don't have the patience tonight to untangle that. And you're not open enough. I got that in the right. Yeah, I have. It's in the right place, but I can't get hold of the ring. There we go. With chainmail, it's always worth, as you go along, making sure you've got the rings exactly where they're supposed to be. It is possible to take them out and put them in again afterwards. You know, halfway down, if I've got one wrong down here, it is possible to take it out. It is possible to get it in, but there's a difference between possible and easy. Frequently, it's not easy, even if you can see where it wants to go, just because, you know, things like the nose of these pliers are relatively, well, they're tiny. They're not actually that tiny. They're quite big when you want to try and get them in there, in that little gap in there, to grab a hold of a ring in order to close it. And for some weaves, it's almost impossible to do that because of the way how tight the weave is. For example, it can be almost literally impossible to change a ring that's in the weave. And what you end up having to do, if you really need it to do it, is take it apart. You know, go all the way back to where you started. Or start at the beginning and take it apart to go to where you made the, you know, need to change the ring. Which of course can be incredibly frustrating if you've just spent several hours doing something and you then need to take it all apart again. So in woodwork and metalwork, for example, there's a phrase which is kind of measure twice and cut once, which sort of corresponds. You know, you can't add stuff you can't stick metal or wood back on. And whilst you know, you're not cutting anything with this, it's kind of the same thing. You know, correct your mistake before you make them. You know, before you go too far. Because once you have gone too far, you can't really rectify it afterwards. And I do keep thinking about maybe grinding down these even finer towards a needle tip. It wouldn't be fantastically easy to use, but for occasionally for when you need to get in a chain this tiny, for example, they could be quite useful. Of course, you don't need to be a tool maker to do any of this sort of stuff. Sometimes it helps. I'm using the probe here to help get rings into the right position and not actually wanting to fall into the right position to feed a ring through. So I'm using the probe because with it being dead straight and pointy, it's a lot easier to feed it through the rings in this particular case. And then if I can hold them in the right place, feeding this actual ring through becomes a lot easier. And for some weaves it's easier than others to feed a ring through, and you don't necessarily need to go and use a probe like that, but it's a useful tool to have around. I'm holding that off frame, aren't I? So I either zoom out to the point where you can't see what I'm doing, or I zoom in so you can and then work off frame. That's very clever of me. It takes skill to be that silly. Or stupid, even. Okay, I'll do a bit more. Onwards and upwards. I'll do this round, I think, and I'll measure just how far we've got. That's not going to go in, let's open it up a bit. You notice I've started, I start holding the pliers like this now instead of that, which is how I started. I now hold them down there. The reason I hold them down there, that snap doesn't get your fingers. I've learnt and these small rings you don't really want to hold very tight at all. They bend relatively easily, and if you hold them too tight you can actually sort of squash them and create a flat on them, which doesn't look as good as it might otherwise do. Nope, that's what's opening as well. I have not opened these rings near enough. Need to be about, what's that, would be about an eighth of a turn. Is generally about the right sort of opening or twist. And actually I'm opening these clockwise. But one thing to bear in mind is that for certain weaves, sometimes it is actually better to open them backwards or open them anti-clockwise, because the way in which you need to feed the best way to feed the ring into the weave means you've got to come at it from the other side, so to speak, and when you've opened a ring clockwise, what that sometimes means is that the other end to the one that you're trying to feed, so if I try and feed this back side in, this front side gets in the way. and in that particular case, if you open it the other way around, they stay out of each other's way. I was going to measure it at this point. Well, I'll put this round in and then I'll measure it. That one is still not open enough, or rather I haven't opened it enough. There we go. It's not worth fiddling around trying to force it in. You might as well just take it out, open it up, and then try again. It's generally speaking quicker to do that than to actually fiddle around trying to force it and get frustrated about it not wanting to go in, and it's slipping and springing off and all sorts of things. Right, let's measure this and see how far we've got. I suspect I haven't got as far as I thought I would do, but let's see. What are we at? So, well, actually we're at 7 inches. So in, how long we've been streaming? 1.5 hours. It's taken 1.5 hours to open and then weave 1 inch of chain. And what we're going to do is change my glasses for a start, because at this moment in time they're giving me a headache. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that button there. Thank you. And I am going to say that's it for tonight. It was frustrating me a little bit, and it's coming up to 9 o'clock, which is when I want to stop for this evening. I'm trying to stream between 7 and 9 PM each night, which gives me a little bit of time after the stream then to do one or two other things before it's time to go to bed. And fortunately, I don't always quite make the 7 o'clock, but I'm doing my best to try and do that. But this is frustrating me a little bit tonight. I'm just not really in the mood for it. So whilst I might potentially have gone on a little bit longer to do a 2-hour stream, I'm not going to bother doing it tonight. I've also still got a bit of a migraine headache, which I have had since this morning. It's almost there, it's almost gone, but it is still there, and it's bothering me a little bit, which is why I've just changed these glasses now. Because I've got a wider depth of field with these glasses, and therefore my eyes aren't struggling as much to see things like the screen. But what I'm going to do now is say good night to you, having first just reminded you about the websites, zaragonart.com, where you can see more general sort of information about some of the pieces and some of the art forms. There is YouTube, where I'm uploading all the 700 hours of Twitch, 700 hours plus, because it keeps growing, of course, an hour and a half tonight, of video. That's 3/4 terabyte of video. So I'm gradually uploading all the Twitch archive. So if you want to see some of the very early broadcasts, then by all means take a look there. See the difference in style. See how some of the pieces were done. And I will, as time allows, put time lapse up there. If you only have 20 minutes to watch something rather than 20 hours, then at least you'll get to see it. There is of course the shop, zaragonart.etsy.com, where chainmail like this is available, well, chainmail and other forms of jewellery and anything else that I choose to put up that we've done on stream, like for example the police box. I was going to show that to the wrong camera. That was glass engraving. Is available there if you want to buy some. Of course, the chainmail is made specially for you. Things like the glass engraving are unique items. And there's Twitter, of course, at Zaragonart. There's Facebook at Zaragonart. So both of those, if you want to take a look at the feed. Follow me on Twitter, for example, if you want notifications of when I go live. I do tweet before I go live, which of course sometimes is a bit easier than the Twitch notifications, but follow me on Twitch as well, you get them there. Even easier not to forget. And of course, finally, the thing I'm going to point out is there's the subscription button up there. If you'd like to consider supporting the stream, by which we buy things like, I'm pointing at stuff you can't see, things like the rings to make chainmail, the wood to do pyrography, the scraper board to do, all these sorts of things, all the tools, then I'd be gratefully received. But for the moment, I shall be back on tomorrow night in approximately 22 hours, hopefully 7 PM UK time. That's 1800 GMT UTC, or after that, just depending on when food gets eaten and consumed and ready, but somewhere around that sort of time. Then I look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now.